Welcome to the Raising Confident Girls podcast, your guide to raising strong, confident daughters. I'm Melissa Jones, the founder of Girls Positivity Club and a teacher for over 20 years. In a world where girls often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused, this podcast is your go-to space. As caregivers, we navigate challenges together. I founded Girls Positivity Club to provide a place where you belong and get the tools to face today's hurdles. Consider this your regular check-in with a trusted friend, offering insights and practical tips for meaningful conversations. I'm here to help you feel confident on this journey of raising a generation of empowered girls. Let's dive in and raise those confident girls together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Raising Confident Girls. I'm Melissa, and I'm so happy to be with you today because it is summertime if you're listening to this in real time, and we have just come off of two really strong, amazing Girls Positivity Club summer camps. So in my local area where I started Girls Positivity Club, I do in-person camps, and we have just had the most two amazing weeks. So if you're one of those parents who enrolled your daughter, thank you so much. We had the best time, and there are so many little snapshots that I could describe from camp, and I'll talk about them, in upcoming episodes and in today. And the best part, though, is the community that you form. Even in 1 week, it's so incredible to me, the power of getting girls together, teaching them little things they can do to believe in themselves, and just putting them in an environment where they can feel like they belong, feel safe, feel seen, and do things they've never done before. So that is what we're all looking for, right? Is for the girls in our life to feel like they know how to believe in themselves and they're surrounded by people who are cheering them on. So that is the topic for today, is how can you help your daughter believe in herself? And really this, especially if you're a parent of a girl, this goes back to, that's what we want for our girls, is we want them and our kids in general to believe in themselves. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? It's one of those things like, oh, well, just believe in yourself and then you'll do it. And it's one of those simple things that is so hard to describe or to teach. And I'm here to tell you that it can be taught, and there are lots of ways to do this. And, when I was young, my mom told me to believe in myself. My dads both told me to believe in myself. And especially like in sports, I was not, if you've listened to other episodes, you'll know this, but I was not the most athletic kid. Like, I literally participated in sports because I was looking for a community to belong. And back in the 80s, that's what you did. You joined a sports team, you joined Girl Scouts. Like, those are really the only ways that I knew and that my parents knew to belong to a community. And what I learned was, unless you are good at those things, or you, in my mind, were one of the popular girls, then you really didn't belong unless you were a certain way. So that was my perception, and that was how it seemed back then, even to my mom. It's like, oh, well, the girls that are really confident and really believe in themselves are the ones that are often the best at everything, or have the most friends, or whatever situation it would be. And I don't know if those girls just internally knew how to believe in themselves, or because they were good at things that they naturally did, or if they ever had inner doubts. My guess would be that they still had inner doubts in other areas, but they appeared to only believe in themselves. And I think realistically, if you're growing as a person, whether you're a child or an adult, you are going to have those times where you do struggle a little bit because you're learning something new, or you are trying to figure out something for the first time, and you're not supposed to be perfect at it all the time, but you've also got to have that inner belief in yourself that you can do it, even if it's not easy. So what I think is so important is that we can teach this to girls while they're growing up. So, like I said, my mom and dad would always, both my dads would always encourage me and tell me to believe. I really just didn't know how to do that on my own when I was alone with myself, or when I was in a situation that felt very chaotic to me, which was like at school. I just was constantly in that state of internal chaos where people probably couldn't tell from the outside, but on the inside, I was just really struggling. And I really just wanted people to see me for who I was. And I really didn't have that positive self talk as a default or as a tool for me to lean on, because I don't know if it just wasn't taught back then, or people just assumed that you just either believed in yourself or you didn't. And I really don't think that that's true. I think it's something that is developed and can change over time, and it can change in both ways. There can be times when you feel like your belief is kind of shook when you are in a situation or something doesn't go the way you plan. And those are the times, especially when you've got to have those internal tools. And then there are times when you're like, wow, I really believe I can do this. And so it's like, what is it that makes certain times easier to believe than others? Is it always when things are going easily? Is that when it's easier to believe? And yeah, I think that is part of it. When things are going well, when you have momentum, it's easier to believe in yourself. And I think it's easier to think like, oh, good, my daughter's going to be fine. And it's, she believes in herself. She's confident all around. We're good. And that's great. And that is definitely a time for everybody. And then there are times where maybe something is hard for her, or maybe she is doing something for the first time that she's never done before. And she may usually be naturally good at things. And in this one area, she has to work harder at it. So those are some situations where belief in yourself and having those tools to work, know that you're worthy of doing it, and know that it's okay if nothing is so simple all the time, if sometimes things are hard to do. And I think that some girls naturally have a default that they can do it. They're going to just keep trying. And other girls struggle with that and think they're looking for evidence of times when things have been hard, and they're like stacking up the evidence that things are always going to be hard. And that is the hardest place to see our daughters in, right? Is like when they're in that mode of, well, this didn't go right, and this other thing didn't go right, and this other thing didn't go right. Like, it's really easy to look for all the things and all the reasons not to believe that it's possible for you. But there's always a way, and there's always a way to flip it. And I've got some tips for you that I hope can help you and your daughter. And I think one thing that's really common in girls is comparison. That is something that it's like we tell them not to compare and to only look at yourself as comparison. I think it's also very natural for the girls to maybe look at someone else who is good at something that they want to be good in and think, I'm so far away from it. How do I believe that I can keep taking steps forward? So the problem is, it sounds really simple, right? The simple thing to say is just keep going. And yes, that is what you do. And it's also the hardest thing to do, especially when your inner voice is like, I don't know if I can really do this. So what we want to do is equip our girls with as many tools as possible with how they can be surrounded by people like you who are going to encourage her and who are going to tell her to keep believing, but she also has to do it herself. And I almost think it's more important that she does it for herself, because someone isn't always going to be right beside her telling her she can do it. There is going to be a point in her life where she has to also have the skill and the tools to know how to do it for herself. And, that can be a huge challenge. A lot of girls have that internal chaos like I did, where that was not a natural default for me to think, I know I can do this. But I always had this whisper inside of me that I knew I was wanting to do more, and that I knew that there was something special I was meant to do. I just didn't know what it was. And it really didn't come to my consciousness until I was much, much older. And the first one was me becoming a teacher. That was the first thing that I was like, oh, I actually think I could help create a better experience for kids in school. And that was my first thing. And I was like, I think I can do this. And I just had this internal knowing that I knew that I could do this and help kids. And then that evolved into me wanting to do something more when my dad was in hospice, sitting in his hospice room and just thinking, you don't know how much time you have left. And for me, it was losing my dad that really brought things to the forefront of my mind of like, I know I'm making good impact in school, but I want to do something more for girls. And I really was reflective on how hard I'd had to work to get to the point where I was teaching myself and learning all these tools to finally believe myself as a woman. It took me that long. And I thought, why couldn't I help girls do this while they're growing up? And so that's how everything was born. And if you've listened to the original story, you'll know more about that. And feel free to go back to that episode 1. But, that negative self talk can get really loud for any of us, and especially girls as they're growing up and as they do things like comparison. So these are the typical things of why it can be hard for girls. I've already said comparison. So it's the comparison, comparing to others who are making things look easy, even down to style. Like there are those girls that just come to school and they just always look put together. They always look themselves. They always look this certain way. And sometimes there are girls that are like, why isn't that easy for me? Or why do I not look like that? And we all know that it's not all about looks. And what we really want our girls to care about is what's on the inside. And at the same time, we can't ignore that it is true that girls still compare physical things to themselves or an ability. Like maybe someone's really good at something. Maybe they want to be in a school play, and there's this girl, and she is the lead, and she is a star, and she probably practices most hours of the day, but that doesn't show when she's at school, right? She's walking around feeling good about who she is because she's living in her passion. And it looks from the other people like she has everything together. Everything's perfect with her. And for a girl who strives to be in that role, it looks simple. And it's really easy to think, I'll never get there, or it's too hard, or I'm not as good as her. And those are some things that are really hard for girls. So that's one thing. Perfectionism is another. I talk to so many girls who, they know logically that they don't have to be perfect. And I've rarely heard a parent, like maybe one or two cases in 23 years, who put a lot of pressure on their daughters to be perfect. It's normally a total individual thing where the girl puts that pressure on herself. They're always like, usually the parents are like, no, just do your best. All I expect is for you to do your best. And then the girl, for whatever reason, in this case of perfectionism, thinks that it has to be perfect. She has to be perfect at all times. So that can be really hard to believe in yourself, especially when you're challenged, like I mentioned earlier, when something, and it will, like something will eventually be hard. I think when I worked with high ability students, the hardest thing was me teaching them that if something was hard for them or they had to work a little bit at something, because they were so used to everything being automatic and easy for them in school, they immediately questioned if they were still smart. And it's like, no, you are still smart. You are completely still smart. You're learning. This is what learning feels like. This is what working for something feels like. And it's really a struggle for girls and kids who it's been easy for them most of the time. And I would rather them have that little bit of struggle while they're at a younger age and while they're growing up rather than wait until adulthood before something finally feels hard. Because what can be concerning is not having the tools, the coping tools to deal with that while you're growing up. If you never have challenge in a certain area, what will you do when a challenge is facing you? And what we want to do is equip them with how to believe in themselves, how to tell themselves they can do it. It's okay if it's hard. It's okay if it's taking me a little bit of work. That means I'm growing as much as possible. The other thing that makes it hard to believe in yourself for girls is negative feedback. So think of all the times that you yourself have gotten compliments And then think of the one negative comment that you got or feedback that you got. Which one is it easier to focus on? Or which one does your brain focus on? Is it all the good things? And I would love to say that all the positive things that people have said to me about what I do and Girls Positivity Club and all of that is what I focus on. And yes, I try as hard as I can to only focus on those things. But occasionally, in any situation, you will get some kind of negative feedback. And it is really hard to not make that the loudest voice or the thing that you think about. So even people talk about this, like famous people talk about how they'll get comments about things. And not that we live by comments or anything like that. They get all these like comments that are like, you've changed my life. Thank you for being such a great role model, all these things. And then they get one negative, and their brain automatically focuses on that negative thing, amplifies it, and thinks, oh, I'm not doing the right thing, or people don't like me, or use whatever fill in the blank story. And that's sad because what we should be focusing on is the good. But for whatever reason, our brains will focus on whatever we look for. And we can choose to look for all the good. And it doesn't mean we ignore the bad. I talk to the girls about that all the time. Doesn't mean we ignore hard things. It just means we choose not to dwell on the one negative thing. But at the same time, it can be one of the biggest challenges, and it can knock you down and make you question your own worth and your own self-esteem and your own confidence, which is hard to say, but it is something that can be a real challenge. And self-doubt. Self-doubt is another one of those things. It's like overthinking something. I've heard so many girls talk about how they've been doing something for a long time, and for whatever reason, they just started overthinking it, and then they doubted themselves or guessing something. So I can't tell you the number of times I've heard girls say, taking a test, they knew the answer was this, but they second guessed themselves at the last minute and changed it. And most of the time, their original intuition was right. And we hear this in safety situations too, right? They knew there was something in them, the intuition telling them not to do that one thing, not to go to that party, not to go down that street, not to open the door, whatever it is. And most of the time, if they don't listen to that intuition, something challenging can happen in that case, and sometimes something dangerous. And that can help you not help you, but that can make you lose that belief in yourself. And it can make it really hard when you have that self-doubt. Sometimes having a lack of role models is another challenge with believing in yourself. Is like, if people only tell you you can go so far, like, oh, well, no one in our family's ever gone to college, so just graduate high school, that's good enough, or whatever the case would be. No one has ever played a professional sport, or no one has ever fill in the blank. And, I think about this for kids. It's like, one of the things that I didn't like in school was at the end of the year, the kids would all kind of predict what they wanted to be when they grow up. And I think that's so much pressure to put on a kid. But also when they said these things like, I want to be a professional singer, or I want to be a pro athlete, I heard adults telling the kids, well, that's only like a 1% chance. So more than likely you won't be able to do that. And I always think to myself, why would you ever tell anyone that? Because what if they are that 1%? Or what if, by hoping and looking for the good and like thinking that they could do it, possibly do it. Now that means they would want to put in the work and all that stuff, but why squash their dream of, maybe they're not that great of a singer and they're like, I want to be a professional singer. You can learn, you can get better, and maybe they don't become the main singer, whatever, like a huge star. But what if they end up singing in their church choir? Or what if they end up just singing for fun in a band? Who cares? At least they are going for something big. And their version of what that could look like doesn't have to be like anyone else's. And I hated it whenever adults would tell them, like, don't get your hopes up. That's very rare to happen, because you never know who you're talking to. And, speaking for someone who was told not to go to college. I wasn't smart enough to go to college. I wasn't the right fit for, so many things. I was told that. And I didn't listen. And I think that's one thing we have to do is just teach them, like, you don't have to listen to the people who tell you can't do something. If you want to do it, you put your mind to it, you take action toward it. You don't just sit around hoping it'll happen. You actually take little steps toward making it happen. That's how you start to believe. And that's how you see that you can do it. And it may not always be easy, but taking those steps forward and having those role models and showing them how to do that is a big step in the right direction. And then the last reason that it can be hard to believe in themselves is external pressure. So this is like if family or somebody in their family, like everybody always goes to this certain school, or everybody always plays a sport in this family, or everybody always gets all A's in the family. That can be a lot of pressure on a kid who it might be hard for them. And it doesn't mean that you don't support them through it, but, looking a certain way, being a certain way can be, sometimes society puts pressure on, girls who are in a certain class or on a certain track, like doing certain things can make things really hard, especially if they want to go against that norm and do something different. So you might be saying, Melissa, you've talked about these problems the whole time. What do we do? So there are lots of things to do. The first thing you can do is encourage that self-discovery. So having her explore those different interests, those different passions, discovering her different strengths, and trying those things out. So I mentioned summer camp early in the episode, and I just finished 2 summer camps, like I said. And in my last summer camp, I had 2 girls who wanted to be volunteers. And they are middle school students, and they've been in Girls Positivity Club in the past. And they wanted to take on a new role. One of those girls reached out to me all on her own and said, I'd like to be a better leader on the soccer field. So would it be possible for me to come and be a leader at your camp? And of course I said yes, because I always want to help the girls see that they can do anything and they can be in different roles in Girls Positivity Club. And so then she became a volunteer. She spent the whole week with me, and so did her friend. Like, she then encouraged another friend to join. And her mom told me that by her just experiencing this new role of being the big kid and being the role model and being the leader in this group of younger girls, it really helped her actually on the soccer field. I guess the coach, like 2 days into camp, pulled her to the side and said, you are on fire tonight. Like, I don't know what's gotten into you. You're already a strong player, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And then they talked to her parents afterwards, and they're like, I don't know what is going on with her, but she is just really shining this week. And they were like, well, she's become a leader at this Girls Positivity Club camp. And they're like, well, whatever it is, keep doing it, because she's found this new spark about herself. And what it is she started believing that she could be a leader among other girls in a new setting other than a sports field. So, and the other girl that volunteered, her mom said the same thing. Like, she was holding herself differently at home. And this is in only a week's time. So imagine over time, as they're trying new roles, as they're trying new activities, as they're developing other strengths other than just one path, the belief that that can put in themselves and the way that can show in their confidence is amazing. The other thing is celebrating her wins and her progress. So one thing that is really, really easy to do is to celebrate big accomplishments. And those things are amazing, but I believe in really celebrating her along the way, all the steps along the path. People always say anyone that has, quote unquote, made it usually never happens overnight. It usually has happened over years and years and years, or at least a few years of practice, dedication, whatever it is to that skill, that talent, that organization, the movie, the everything, whatever case it would be. They had to believe and have that internal talk to keep going and keep trying no matter the failure. So sometimes when we make mistakes, I always tell the girls this, it's so easy to give up. Anyone can give up. But the people that really make progress and really get that internal belief in themselves keep going. And they surround themselves with people who also cheer them on and show them that they can do it too and encourage them to keep going even when things are not easy. That positive self-talk is such a huge game changer. So that is something that I did not have growing up. I did not have any of the internal self-talk. I knew how to do it when I was encouraged by my parents when I was around them, or my friends when I was around them. But when I was alone, all that happened was I was consumed by self-doubt. And what I always tell the girls is be your own cheerleader. What would you say to a friend if she were in this scenario, if she was in this case, if she was just about to do something that she didn't know if she could do it or not, and it was a positive thing? What would you tell her? And they can always tell me. So it's asking your daughter, what would you say to your friend who was in the same case, who felt like giving up, who felt like it was too hard, who felt like she didn't know what to do? What would you say to her in that case? And they would say, keep going. You can do it. I'm right beside you. I'm cheering you on. Like there are so many things you can say. And a lot of times the girls will find one phrase that really helps them. And, I've talked about this before, but I used to have kids write it at the top of their tests. Anytime they would take a test, anytime they would do something that they were a little bit nervous about, I always had them say it in their mind and then write it down and keep it next to their paper so that they remembered to be their own cheerleader first. And the more we can teach girls that, the better. And of course, we want to encourage them, but we also want to teach them how to do it when they're alone facing something and be that person for themselves. And breaking down goals. If they have a huge goal, like the girl who wanted to volunteer, she had a goal of wanting to be more of a leader on the soccer field. She thought, how can I get there besides do things in soccer? Oh, I can be in a new environment and I can try doing more leadership there. Maybe that would help me. Maybe at my other group, if she's in like a music group, maybe I can ask if I can do this other thing. And that'll put me in a new situation where I'm leading the group in warm-ups or something like that. So any of these situations are going to start building her confidence, and it's breaking down that goal of how do I become a team captain or whatever the big goal would be, breaking it down and going in reverse. How can I get there? What are the steps I need to take to get there? And you can completely help her with that, because sometimes when we know where we're going, it can feel like it's really far away. And in breaking that down, like, okay, what would be the step before that? And then what would be the step before that? And the step before that? And the step before that? And what could I do right now? And really breaking it down into smaller pieces, it's going to help her feel like it's more manageable and that she can do it and it is possible. And without putting a timeline on it, because you don't know when something's going to happen. You don't know when you're going to have that breakthrough. And sometimes it can come sooner than you expect. And sometimes it can take longer than you expect. But you have to believe along the way and keep encouraging yourself no matter what, which can be the hardest thing, but also the most powerful thing you can do. And then the last thing is be a support to her. And I think that's the most natural thing that most parents can do, is just keep encouraging her to keep going. Keep being that sounding board for her. Keep checking in. Keep telling her that it's okay, and find those examples in your own life of when something seemed really hard, but you kept going and you were able to do the thing. And find her role models, look for whatever area she's really good at and she like wants to achieve in that area, or she wants to just do better in that area. Find some examples of people in your community, in your family, and in the spotlight in some way that are positive role models, and help support her by seeing in her that she can do anything she puts her mind to, because I know you love and care about her and we all want the best for our girls. So when we do this, we teach her over time how to believe in herself, and we teach her different ways to do that. So I hope this was helpful. If you have other ideas for how you help your girls in your life believe in themselves, please let me know by sending me an email at girlspositivityclub@gmail.com or just send me a message on social media. I would love to hear from you. And until next time, keep raising those confident girls who know how to believe that they can do anything. Thanks for joining another empowering episode of the Raising Confident Girls podcast. Share today's insights with caregivers and friends, building beautiful relationships with strong girls. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're not just a podcast, we're a community. Follow Girls Positivity Club on social media for more empowering content on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. This podcast empowers you, supporting incredible girls. Let's create strong, beautiful relationships with the girls in our lives. I appreciate you listening today. Stay confident, stay connected. Until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You've got this.